So we have the well-behaved table over here, and the rest of you need to emulate these guys. It's getting to that time. Okay. Is everyone ready? And well, welcome everybody. Welcome, Chris, Sarah, and some special welcomes, some faces that we don't see here all the time. David, lovely to see you here this morning with us. So welcome, and a special welcome also to Ben. So Ben's going to talk to us in a bit and sing to us in a bit. And next to Ben, to Jess. Lovely to see Jess with us here this morning. And Paul and Karen.
She said she felt Pepper was shocked to see her this morning.
Well, did she? So let's start going. And welcome, everyone. Welcome to this place this morning, whether you're here in person with us or you're here via our online community this morning. And in extending this welcome, Hartwell proudly acknowledges, my mouth's not working, is it? Hartwell proudly acknowledges the Aboriginal community and their rich culture, and we pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land and the water on which we rely. We acknowledge that this land was never ceded and that many First Nation people still experience exclusion, discrimination and oppression. And today, alongside those people, all are welcome here for the purposes of gathering and reflecting. In gathering, we affirm, support and encourage each other. And in reflecting, we acknowledge that the work and courage required for our inward journey is each of our responsibility. And it's a responsibility that we owe to all those that we share the planet with and who we meet and engage with on our outward journey. So welcome. Welcome. Namaste. We see you. You are in a safe place. You are enough. Welcome this morning. So today our format and our time together is going to be quite different than normal. And it's fair enough probably that that's the case because we're now in the third week of our Amos series, and the theme for today is Your Worship Stinks, right? So that's the theme. So given that that's the theme, we thought we probably should do something a little bit different. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend some time hearing what Amos says to us. And based on this, I'm going to suggest 3 ideas. They're going to be 3 pretty simple ideas. And after I've introduced each idea to you, and I'm promising that I'm not saying that they're good ideas or they're right ideas, they're just going to be ideas, right? After I've introduced each idea to you, we're just going to spend a few moments reflecting on that idea, and maybe we'll share, but no pressure. Somewhere in the middle, we're going to have some time with Ben. And Ben, I'll introduce Ben a little bit more to you along the way, but Ben has a little while ago, 18 months ago, God? Yeah, about 18 months ago, Ben released a song called God. So Ben has some ideas about God. So we're going to play that song. We're going to have a bit of a chat with Ben. Towards the end of the service, Ben's actually going to sing to us. And then in the midst of all that, or, you know, as we start to do that, we'll get Brian up to lead us in communion. That moment where we symbolically share food together. For surely sharing food is one of those universal human acts of engagement, of care and of hospitality. So let's get started, hey? And of course we're going to start with the words of Amos. So I'll get Trine up in a second to read them. But today, as we read these words, we are going to be confronted again by Amos. At the start of April, and it was Merrill who introduced the opening week in this series, Merrill alerted us to the fact that Amos is going to challenge us and confront us. When we read Amos out of the text, we call Amos a prophet. But my hunch is that if Amos was standing up in our community, we'd actually call Amos an activist. In fact, some of us may call Amos far ruder words than that, but we'd call Amos an activist. So, Trine, come and read what Amos has to say to us today.
Ooh, can I read from here?
You can, yep.
Thanks. So it's taking chapter 5, verse 18 to 23. How terrible will it be for you, all who long for the day of the Lord? What good will that day do for you? For you, it will be a day of darkness and not of light. It will be like a man who runs from a lion and meets a bear, or like a man who comes home and puts his hand on the wall only to be bitten by a snake. The day of the Lord will bring darkness and not light. It will be a day of gloom without any brightness. He's a happy chap, isn't he? The Lord says, I hate your religious festivals. I cannot stand them. When you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. I will not accept the animals you have fattened to bring me as offerings. Stop your noisy songs. I do not want to listen to your harps. And I'm not allowed to read the fourth verse. And then it finishes by saying, instead let justice flow like a stream and righteousness like a river that never goes dry.
So as we said, it's hardly a happy reading, really, is it? And it sort of has those two themes. And the first part of the reading is about undermining the concepts of safety. You know, a bloke runs away from a lion, thinks he's getting away, but you know what happens? He runs into a bear. He walks into his house and he puts his hand on the wall and his snake bites him, right? So there's this sort of confronting idea that that place which you thought was safe, in actual fact, is not safe. And then it rolls into that second part where I hate your religious festivals, I dislike the harp. Yeah, fair enough too. You know, I've never been a big fan of the harp myself, but Sarah likes the harp.
Your worship stinks, Danny.
Yeah, but that's exactly right. And it comes to, you know, I'm not going to look at your burnt offerings at all. And, you know, you don't have to be terribly wise or insightful to get the message, do you? The message is pretty well in your face. And the message is simply this. Substance is more important than form. So there's our idea. There's the first idea. Substance is more important than form. Because what Amos says is, look, you're going through all of these religious festivals and these practices, all of these forms, but you're not doing the one thing that really matters. And what's the one thing that really matters? It's verse 24, right at the end, the train read. If I can find it here, verse 24, instead, let justice flow like a stream and righteousness like a river that never goes dry. And as Meryl reminded us in the first week, righteousness, which is one of those words that sort of feels all flowery and religious, really is a word that's perhaps best translated as right relationship. So you've got all these people who are engaged in these religious practices and forms, but they're not acting justly and they're not in good relationship with each other. And so their worship stinks. Their worship stinks. Today, perhaps even words that may be better than righteousness and justice in some senses might be respect and inclusiveness. Now, it's easy for us to respond to this reading by saying, oh, look, he's 3,000 years old. It doesn't really matter to us. But how are we going with justice and inclusiveness? And if we really look around us today, we'd be foolish not to notice that the relevance, engagement and efficacy of the Christian church in Australia is plummeting. That's what's happening. Actions like the stolen generation, like the child sex abuse scandals, our response to marginalised groups and communities, the marriage equality debate, all of these things have been occurring over a period of time. And the church's response in this regard has undermined our social licence. And it has raised questions about our substance, what is our substance? And the community has started to disengage with it. And as a result of their questions about the substance of what we have, they now find our forms to be a hurdle. Our rituals have somehow become hurdles that hold back the community from engaging with us. So for many Australians, our worship stinks, just as Amos articulated. So here's what I want us to do first. We're going to have a moment of reflection, and I want you to reflect on this. What do you think are the forms or the elements of what we do here that make this place inaccessible to people in our community? And when you think about people, I don't want you to think about faceless, nameless people who you don't know. I want you to think about your kids or your partners or your neighbours, the neighbours that you like, the neighbours you'd like to see here. What is it that we do that makes this space inaccessible? Is it our language, the way we speak? Is it our music? Is it our worldview? We're just going to sit quietly and we're going to play a little bit of music in the background and then just see if you can identify one or two things. What are the forms that make us inaccessible? Bo, a little bit of music to think of.
I think that 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning is accessible for a lot of people.
possibly true. Any other thoughts?
I probably disagree with the premise of the question in terms of why would you assume it should be accessible, in terms of this body here, because I would say that if we have got neighbours who we like, that we befriend and we spend time with, that we are accessible, in a broader format of the community, and the concept of us needing to be accessible here is almost evangelical in nature.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Old-fashioned.
It's a good thought.
It's not about numbers, it's about how we engage with the community around us in each of our lives, and that influence is just as important as being accessible to this building here.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Anyone else got any thoughts? Did anyone recognise the music? Leonard Cohen, Sisters of Mercy. Why do you think? Why do you think I might have played Leonard Cohen, who's just one of those great poetic troubadours, rather than some great hymn?
I didn't even hear it, but I thought Leonard Cohen wrote hymns.
He probably does too, doesn't he? So here's a quote. You want to put the quote up for us, Bo? Right, here's a quote. The prophetic voice is the voice of those who have worked and struggled to be authentic. Does anyone know who I'm quoting when I say that? No, it's not Joel. I'm quoting Meryl. That's what Meryl said in the very first week. Yeah. I wrote it down when she said it in the first week. Let me read it to you again. The prophetic voice is the voice of those who have worked and struggled to be authentic. And when Meryl said that, and she was talking about Amos in this context, Meryl said, today I think probably our comedians may be the prophets. Well, alongside our comedians, I would often say it's very often our poets and our songwriters who are also our prophetic voices. And hence, for me, Leonard, a great poet and songwriter. But that, of course, brings me to the great segue into where we're going next. So in a minute, I'm going to get Ben up here to talk. We're going to watch his little video. I shouldn't say little video. We're going to watch the video before I invite him up. But let me give you a bit of a background on Ben so you know who he is. So Ben and I have known each other for about 15 years, I think, now. And our lives have sort of moved across each other in different ways and different phases. And over the last couple of years, I've had the great joy of calling Ben a friend. We've become sort of from about mid-COVID, we sort of reconnected and we've become much closer in that time. For the whole time I've known Ben, he's always wanted to be a rock star. And when I first knew him, he was a drummer. Drummers are always where I'm sorry, Andrew. But he's dedicated his life to being a musician and to playing music in a contemporary format, right? He's got a band now called Slowly Slowly. It's not his first band. There's been a few along the way. But Ben now is a rock star. Now, when I say that, what do I mean? Well, I mean that if you go on to Spotify, which is where music's consumed these days, and you look at, say, Ben's about top 10 songs, he's had now about 10 million downloads. He's got about 95,000 active followers a month who are listening to his music. He's just signed his US record deal. He's just announced the dates on his UK tour. And he'll be, signing signatures on your arms and stuff after if you want him to. No, not at all. So Ben is moving in a marketplace that probably most of us don't move in. But Ben now has a global voice that speaks to a lot of people and hopefully will speak to more soon. About 18 months ago, Ben released a song called God, right? So I'd like to play that song to you now so you can watch the video, and then we're going to have a bit of a chat about it. Because the grand irony, of course, is this, that when Ben speaks about God, more people listen than when we do. So let's hear what Ben said about God. You can turn it up a bit, Bo.
When I get to heaven, is God gonna cry? Or will he smile and nod while watching the time? Yeah, when I get inducted, will my welcome notes say you had a good run, son? I like that one song. Hey, did he sit up all night wondering how to say that he's kind of a big fan from the chamomile days? My favorite part was when you wished you would die, and up here, man, there wasn't a dry eye, silly old thing. That green and blue marble floating in darkness. How cool are the stars, though, didn't give it much thought. But maybe it's unfair that there's heaps of cancer, death and despair. I asked politely, but wasn't that the devil? He pauses for a second, says he's gonna level. It was all middle management pressure from above, some universal interest about some real estate stuff. It's over my head, don't take it to heart. Just view this as kinda like a nice fresh start, where you sit in eternity with no good or evil in an endless cosmos in the eye of a needle. I said, hey God, he said, who me? Well, you must have me confused, I'm just a corporate slogan. See, if you need a reason, good or bad, you can rely on me for your facts. I said, so wait, then what's the point? He said, you're looking for God, I'm sorry but this ain't the joint. You just came from earth, you're telling me you didn't feel a thing, you had the holy keys. Seriously now, you fell in love and that's God right there. What else could you want, son? You're telling me that I saw God, no heaven or hell. Well, that kinda sucks. So I was kinda hoping for a trial by fire, some beautiful paradise style inspired by everything I liked and things that felt right. He said, that's not quite how it works, you know the budgets are tight. So what now? He said, well, I'll leave you to it. You got some thinking and you got a lot of time to do it. Bet you kinda wish now you know the drill. You saw heaven every second that the world stood still. I said, nice to know that that was all I had and there was nowhere to go. I would've used all my time to be a little more loving in my life. I would've called my enemies up, said sorry that I messed up. I would've held it all so tight, I wouldn't have done things out of spite. Isn't it weird? You believe or you don't, but either way you should probably make the most of it, cause the core of it is right here, right now, and I hope you notice it.
Well, Ben, come up the front here. How does it feel to sit and watch yourself on the telly?
It's very awkward, isn't it?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for coming along
thanks for
this
having me.
morning. It's really great to have you here. And I guess the three questions, and I'll put them out there, but I'm happy for you to sort of speak to whatever. And I'm happy for people to put their hand up and ask questions too, if you've got stuff that's there. So I guess the things that I'd sort of engage you around, why did you write it?
Yep.
What were you trying to say? And what's been the response? So let's start there and then see where we go.
Okay. So I wrote the song back in 2018. And what prompted the whole thing, I've never really been one to, and the whole thing sort of comes with a caveat. I'm not like someone that would tackle the grand thing, subject of religion lightly, but it was, my stepmom had become like really ill. And over the next couple of years, she got progressively worse. And this was during the COVID lockdowns, and she ended up passing away. And throughout that period, my dad, like, it was very hard on the whole family, but my father found religion, who was a devout atheist for our entire upbringing. And so throughout this tumultuous time with my stepmom and not being able to see her, and it was just awful, but my dad found a lot of solace in faith. And I think, as a lot of like father-son relationships go, I look up to my dad greatly, and he's just been like a real role model for me my whole life. And for him to have this like shift and change his entire like blueprint on how he saw the world, and kind of it forced me for the first time in my life to grapple with those concepts, those really grand concepts that I usually would have just gone, I don't know, I don't care, And suddenly, it was a bit of a mirror to myself, and I had to think about it. So, like any early 30s male, I wrote a song about it instead of talking to anyone. And the song sort of, I didn't think much of it at the time. It really happened very quickly. I just sort of like spat it all out, showed a few people, our manager at the time, and everyone was like, oh, okay, this is like, a big serious thing. And I was like, oh, is it? Okay. And then we released the song, and it's had like a tremendous response, and people, they think it's like intelligent. I've never really thought about it that way. But I think it was, when I look back retrospectively upon like the whole process, how I wrote it and what it means, it sort of changed to me over time. I think initially I sort of viewed it as like a bit of a poking of the bear, or just like a challenge to those constructs, and wanting to kind of like pull at the threads because I was frustrated by my dad's worldview. But now I think when I listen to the song, it's completely different to me now. I think I was trying to find like a common ground or something, because, and this is, again, like, it's blunt, like not an intelligent. I find it really hard to talk about these things with having the onus on myself, who's not well versed in a lot of these things. But the way that I made sense of my situation at the time was, I kind of played on the concept of like, what if this is the afterlife? What if this is it? And no one can tell you otherwise. So it's like, say you subscribe to like a religious doctrine, and you believe that during your life you have to, live against a subset of principles that allow you to get into heaven. And so you would try and be as good as possible and subscribe to a lot of those testaments, etc. And then if it doesn't exist, if none of it exists and we're just worm food, then all we have is that moment that's fleeting anyway, so you might as well be really good anyway. And so for me, it was just like this Venn diagram of the belief system that I found like an olive branch to where my dad was thinking about things. Because I don't consider myself religious, but I think I needed to find common ground with him. And the song, for me now, it sort of echoes that sentiment of just being very present and being very just mindful of like, your impact on the world. But it seems to have meant a lot to a lot of different people. But I'm and it's people who've gone through similar experiences and had to, grapple with religion later in life, or also, we've had crazy people. There was this one instance. I didn't plan this. I just remembered it right now. But we had a couple that wrote to us that had lost their baby like hours after it had been born, and for those hours that they spent with the child as it was very sick in hospital, they just had the song on repeat, and it provided some respite or hope about what was going on, because neither of the people were religious, but it just had this hope to it. And anyway, that's been sort of like, I think of the song as like a thought experiment rather than just like a this is my take on what's going on, because I have no idea. But I think about it just like a bit of a curious wandering through the construct of religion, because I think it's it's not in vogue for people my age to be grappling with any of this stuff, and so it's like but I think it's like the most punk thing you can do is to talk about these things that you would shy away from. That's not, and it's so I don't know. I found the whole thing like new territory for me, but yeah, rewarding nonetheless. But yeah,
Thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you for being so frank and honest. Has anyone got any comments, questions, thoughts? Mary, now what I'll do for the people online, once you say it, either come up so we can hear you, or I'll repeat it. Okay? Yeah, come up. You come up. Yeah.
Okay.
On behalf of Amos, it's fantastic biblical theology.
Okay.
Everything you said is basically what the Bible's about, and we've stuffed it up completely. Judaism is completely about that. C.S. Lewis said ages ago, obviously, that the Jews lived for a couple of thousand years without the carrot of life after death in front of them, because they didn't believe in it. And so for them it was, how do we live with each other now? How do we do the best we can? That's what righteousness was. And then Christian, the New Testament's about following in the path of Jesus, which is the kingdom of God is here among you, within you. It's not then, it's here. And it's how you bring in the marginalised and how you look after people. And then somehow we've slowly added more and more onto it about what you do, whereas what the New Testament was trying to do was get away from all the rules and regulations that had slowly, so sort of wave after wave of revolution to get back to the real.
Yeah.
So absolutely, fabulous, thank you.
Oh. I'm glad you didn't have to repeat that.
That was the professional opinion.
Oh, nice. Yeah, well, yeah, that's very interesting.
Anyone else? Brian, were you going to say something or not? No?
What did your dad think of the song?
Yeah, he loved it. I mean, we have like a really comfy relationship where he understands, because it's if you've lived X amount of years in your life, without a belief system, and it took you all of these trials, tribulations in life to get to the point where you have it. I think you have to have compassion for people that aren't there yet. So he's not very rigid in his, it's not like a evangelical thing of trying to force anything on us. It's just that's what he believes in. And so there was resistance from me at the start because I just known him as this devout atheist. And so it was like, and it was just, I think when anybody that close to you changes so greatly, it is disconcerting. But yeah, I really it's helped me to see the world through him as well through that. And yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
I think the other comment for me is there's no doubt our worship stinks, right? And for all sorts of reasons, but the bit you talked about being present and mindful, that's the God stuff where you're just open to what's going on around you. And yeah, the fact that you got to that point, it's God stuff.
Yeah.
Now, Ben's actually going to play for us a little later. There's a range of, Ben's actually going to play once we turn the live stream off for a range of reasons to do with copyrights and all these sorts of fun things. So you're going to have to be present in our place to hear that. So bad luck for all you online. So thank you so much.
Oh, my
I'm
pleasure.
looking forward to hearing you play at the end of the service. And easy. Thanks.
All right.
So really quickly, a really quick second idea, although maybe we'll just jump to a third idea, actually, just in terms of time. The second idea I was going to explore a little bit was that there's this, Amos talks to us about this dichotomy between form and substance. And I was going to explore the idea a little bit that often it's our need to control is what drives form over substance. Because through form we can control behaviour and we can, and as I think about the church, I think often the church has used form to control adherence. But as I think about the Spirit, I think the Spirit is the spirit of humanity, the spirit of, it's this thing that breaks out and is uncontrollable, and so the sense of trying to control, I think, is an interesting thing for us to think about. But rather than think about that, I'm just aware of time, so I'm going to go straight to idea 3. But I've really missed you up here. I'm sorry. So let's just think about our worship stinks. You know, we read Amos there this morning, and I think any honest assessment of the life and teaching of Jesus finds him to be in a very similar school of thought to Amos. If you think about Jesus throughout his life, he stands within the Jewish tradition, but he stands within that tradition as a person who constantly challenges the tradition. He challenges the religious precepts and the forms that embed power and prejudice in the religious and political structure which undermined justice and inclusiveness. And if you really think about what he did in his life, that's sort of at the heart of it, I reckon. You know, and the stories he tells are stories that protect and honour the people who are on the margins. They protect and honour women. They protect and honour children. They draw them in. You know, foreigners, tax collectors. You know, we get parables like the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the parable of the Good Samaritan, you know, it's a nice story and all that sort of stuff, but a deeply offensive story for Jesus' community, because he identifies the foreigner as the voice of God in the situation. So, I mean, if Jesus were telling the story of the parable of the Good Samaritan today, he may well be telling the story. It might be called the parable of the transgender Muslim, because he would have chosen a character that confronted our sensibilities as the way that God was going to enter the story. You know, and there's so many of those stories. The story of the woman caught in adultery. Now, I'm assuming there was a fella there as well, otherwise adultery would have been a little hard. But they only managed to catch the woman, and the bloke got away. And there's that fantastic story where the woman's thrown, and I'm guessing naked, at Jesus' feet. And he bends down and he draws in the sand. And you can almost see in that story Jesus drawing the gaze of the angry crowd away from the vulnerable woman onto himself, you know. And then he stands up and says, okay, whoever's not sinned, you can throw the first stone. They all sort of wander away. So Jesus consistently tells these stories that bring in the marginalised, that protect them, that honour those people who are not honoured. Like Amos, Jesus was an activist. And you know, history tells us that his activism resulted in him being put to death by the state for insurrection. We create, a wrap that goes around that. But that's the heart of it. Jesus was put to death by the state as a result of insurrection. I think that it's highly likely that if Jesus of Nazareth were to be present in our midst today, then he would be offended and possibly even irate at the religious practice that now bears his name. I suspect he may tell us our worship stinks. But before we get perhaps too dejected by this, I think Amos points us in the direction of the religious deodorant, I'll call it. Amos points us in the direction of the religious deodorant. He says, let go of the forms of the religion that provide us with security and comfort and control and privilege. Be curious, act justly and be in right relationship, meaning be respectful and inclusive with each other. And do this globally. Now that might sound easy, but it turns out that in actual fact it can be quite hard. I want to just share one final thing with you, and then I'm going to ask Brian to come up. So is the last photo up there, Bo? Is there a photo of a African-American man and a female? That one, yeah. So this is a photo of a lady called Cindy McAuliffe, and the man is called Benny Boll. You may remember that in February this year there was a terrible incident in Queensland where a group of young African-American men stabbed to death a lady called Wilson White in the supermarket car park at Redbank. The lady was 70 and she was with her grandchild who was 6 at the time. And there was this massive community outcry about this, right? Sometime after the incident, the lady's daughter, Cindy McAuliffe, came out. And this is actually a news story on what she said. The daughter of a Redbank Plains murder victim, Wilson White, has called for peace after reports of abuse and hostility towards the local African community. Wilson White, 70, was stabbed in front of her 6-year-old granddaughter at Redbank Plains in Ipswich on Saturday during a suspected carjacking. 5 boys aged between 15 and 16 have been charged over the incident, one with murder. Queensland African Communities Council President Benny Boll said there's been a rise in hostility and verbal abuse towards the Australian African community since the incident. You shouldn't be in this country, pack all of your stuff and go back to your country. You can imagine how that's affecting people everywhere, Mr. Boll said of the online abuse. Ms. White's daughter, Cindy McAuliffe, stood alongside Mr. Boll at a press conference on Thursday, calling for the racial abuse to stop. Mum's legacy will live on in peace. She was never one to be prejudiced. She always looked for the best in people, Ms. McAuliffe said. Her mother's death had left her heartbroken and affected the entire community, she said. You're always going to have rogue kids, it doesn't matter what colour, there's always going to be some troublemakers, but you don't judge the whole community on a couple of bad apples. Ms. McAuliffe said her mother always pursued peace and that should be her legacy, not a divided community. Mum always said if I died, no one would even care. Well, I'm sorry, Mum, but you're sort of a bit in the spotlight now, she said. If this is all for one reason, it is to pursue peace. Mr. Boll said Mrs. White's death had shaken the nation and Queensland, but it was now time for unity. This is not about religion or race, he said. He called for the racist vitriol and the community called for an end to the racist vitriol and for the community to stand together to honour Ms. White's legacy. I suspect that is an act of worship that didn't stink. I mean, how brave was that lady in the face of an horrendous situation? Just desperately sad and terrible. But I suspect that was something that Amos, and probably Jesus, wouldn't have seen as an act of worship that stank. Just a thought. Over to you, Brian.
Sometimes our communion has stunk as well. And it is a tradition that we do well in churches of Christ. That's been my sense over the years. But within Christianity itself, it's often been used as it's been weaponized about who gets excluded, who participates, those kinds of things. And so I'm going to play a song by a DJ called King Britt. I'm sure you haven't heard of him, but if you've watched the movie Selma, some of his stuff goes on there. And he's taken the words of an African-American person called Gertrude Morgan and kind of reworked some of the audio from the early 1900s around some of his music. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And the song's called Living Bread. But as we do communion together, again, you know, come to this space in any way that you feel comfortable. The symbol can work in different ways for different people. But as we share communion together, let's focus on the idea of communing. That's communication, picking up, Danny, on right relationships, questions of justice. As we share this meal together, let's just celebrate our togetherness. The fact that we are a living, breathing community, trying to be in right relationship with each other and right relationship with others, trying to do justly and do mercy and walk humbly. Yeah, just around the table, share communion together, and let's remember that and value that for what it is. Amen.
Good morning. This is quite a big show to put together today, a service to put together. And I did most of the slideshow, so that meant that I didn't have much time to do a pastoral prayer. However, as these things work out, I was thinking about it the whole time that I was working on that. And unfortunately, Danny left out the whole bit about form and substance, because that plays pretty much into what I'm going to talk about. I'm an artist, And we talk about form and content, the form being the thing that you make and the content being that thought and inspiration and whatever that goes into it. And often we work the other way around. We don't pick the form first, we pick the content first. The thing that moves you, the idea that you have, then plays a part in choosing what the form will be. And if you get it right, there'll be imbalance, and neither side will sort of fight with each other. And I think, Ben, your song's a really good example of that. And you can, that thought, all of the things that you talked about, your emotions and everything, are there, and it's probably what makes it so, authentic. And you can feel that. It's not like you wrote something that was trite, and somebody could have done something that was similar, that was just, a whimsical kind of version of that, and it wouldn't work. It's that depth that's there, which is the thing, and I think it's that depth that's missing when you only look at form. And I would add something to the idea of form. Form may certainly help to entrench power, but form is also the most massive laziness that there is under the sun. You no longer think, you suspend the creative part of yourself and just assume something that's already there, like a uniform, without question, without doubt, because it's easy and everybody else is doing it. The other way is to do your own thinking and to dare to bring that in front of other people, to share that, the vulnerable part of you that's not necessarily the right thing. So I'll read a few words here that I have that I think play to this. And this is a book called Church of the Wild, which I've had for a while, and it's about changing the form of the church so much that you go back into the forest to talk to God. This book is a prayer. It says Mirabai Star on the cover. And Catherine of Siena in the 14th century said this: "All has been consecrated. The creatures in the forest know this. The earth does, the seas do, the clouds know, as does the heart full of love. Stranger priests should rob us of this knowledge, and then empower himself with the ability to make holy what already was." And this is a deconstructed prayer because it comes in 3 bits, not related to each other. This is something that I got from John at some point, written by Edwina Gately in God's Womb, which I've had sitting on my bathroom cupboard. And when I was showering yesterday morning, I thought, I think I should incorporate that in this. Let your God love you. Be silent. Be still. Alone. Empty. Before your God. Say nothing. Ask nothing. Be silent. Be still. Let your God look upon you. That is all. God knows. God understands. God loves you with an enormous love and only wants to look upon you with that love. Quiet. Still. Be. Let your God love you. Amen. And the third bit came to me this morning, again in the shower, when I remembered that I'd written a prayer to a tree whilst doing the Ignatian exercises during COVID. And it's called You Tree. We had to find a tree. When you could go out to a park but you couldn't talk to a human or hold a human, we were invited to go out and find a tree and give it a big hug. So this is the prayer that it resulted. Your bark is like a river in full flood, your history written into your hide. Its scars are caught, held, gentled within the stream of your growth, their ugliness loved into beauty. Every bit of your stillness is in flow. Your presence hums. I touch you. We share a silent greeting, me and you, tree. Amen.
just before we close, a few things that's coming up over the next month. And a few other events. So Meryl will bring our Amos time together to a close next week. So, and I think the title is "It All Ends in Hope" or something along those lines. Yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds good. So activist Amos comes to an end, or hopefully doesn't come to an end, continues. And then 12th of May. We're going to be celebrating the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. So there's a bunch of us working together in that space for that Sunday. So we'd love you guys to all come along to that. And of course, the following Sunday, Joyce Chimbila is with us, and she's going to share a little bit about her work with Future for Kids. But don't forget on the 18th, and these are on your table if you haven't got them, for the fundraiser the day before from 2 to 4. So please join that space. As many of us as possible would be amazing for that fundraiser, which is, I think it's 2 to 4 on the 18th. Is that right? So, but please do sign up. And then the last Sunday of May, what we can learn from Buddha. So that'll be fun for us too. I think when Sarah and I were texting back and forth about that, she says, when I said, what can we learn from Buddha, ? She said, lots, which I thought was pretty cool. And so that's kind of a wild month ahead of us, so it's going to be fun. But we're going to end on a bang because the 2nd of June is the rapture. So, and I realize there's some people who might not know what's going on there, so I'm slightly joking just in case you're worried. Okay. You want to say something, do you? I can see you want to say something. No. All right. So that's all that's happening. So we're going to bring our time together here as a close, but in doing that, Ben's going to play some lovely music for us. So Ben, if you'd come up and take it away and share a little bit about your music. Yep.
Could I just make a...
Oh, yes, sorry, just hang on 1 second. Yep.
Invite everyone to book their tickets early rather than late.
Yeah, book tickets early rather than late.
Yes, because
Yeah.
then we know how many people are coming.
Yeah.
And we can do catering and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So on the card there's the try booking thing address on there.
Yeah.
That would be appreciated.
So for those online, try booking earlier rather than later so we can do some good planning. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, you guys can hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to play a song called Time. And I just thought it would be a nice sentiment